Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
The boy said that the spoon doesn't exist. It really resonated with me back then. And, well, I was probably around 13 years old when I watched that movie. If you recall, it was released in 1999. That was such a long time ago. And, well, that's how life was back then. You know, childhood had many tough times, but I remember that magical feeling. You know how it is? At that age, you truly want the world to open up before you, allowing you to see how everything truly functions. Perhaps you might even gain some special abilities. While I was preparing for this stream, I remembered how all of that felt. And truthfully, at that time, I could not have possibly foreseen that 15 years would go by. Before my awakening, I had already been practicing for several years, and I was literally about to experience exactly what that little boy had been talking about. At the moment of my awakening, I suddenly perceived the energy from which everything here is composed. And essentially, everything we see and perceive, all that we can hear, feel, or in any way experience throughout our lives, all exists due to this energy. In essence, it's all composed of it. Nothing exists beyond it. All these objects, they only appear to us in this specific way because our perception operates at a very slow pace. And as all of this was unfolding before me, as I gazed into that depth, it was a direct, immediate experience without any substances whatsoever. I hadn't taken a thing. I mean, I was completely sober, in my right mind. I saw what gives birth to all this energy, what this entire world truly originates from. Everything that exists comes from it. Well, different cultures have different names for it, but I've personally come to label it as the source. But at that very moment, it became strikingly clear to me that I was indeed that source. I am that very source from which all this energy originates, allowing everything to be perceived. Do you know what it resembles? It's like you'd lived your entire life, and then, all at once, the curtain dropped. And suddenly, just like in the Truman Show, you realized how every single thing in your life had unfolded in the absolute best possible way for you. Even the toughest, most difficult experience, the one you wish had never happened, is what brought you to this very point, and you see just how appropriate and timely it all was. When The Matrix was being filmed, Keanu Reeves was personally experiencing a very challenging period in his life. He was constantly questioning whether what we perceive is truly all there is to reality, if what we see is actually real. Yes, that's a profound question. Keanu Reeves actually said later that for him, The Matrix is like a documentary. And truthfully, he didn't elaborate on many aspects, because cinema, naturally, truncated numerous philosophical ideas that were originally embedded in the film's script, you see? They merely retained the visually impressive scenes. Nevertheless, through various metaphors, this film provides us with clues, subtly hinting at how everything is truly structured. Even if it's merely a metaphor for virtual reality, many of the concepts presented in the film truly hold significant relevance and meaning. And, well, it's probably worth noting here that the film genuinely changed the consciousness of many people. However, it truly possessed the potential to be profoundly awakening. But alas, like so many aspects of our world, it merely transformed into yet another form of slumber. Especially the later sequels, which were made more, to satisfy the production, right? And all the profound ideas were taken out. Exiting the Matrix is quite a complex matter. Sometimes I even wonder, why even step out? Yeah, I even prepared a meme on this topic. Yes, you can escape the Matrix. It's a necessary and important thing, by the way. And I would truly appreciate hearing from you on this, because after all, there are millions upon millions of people who currently reside within the Matrix. And really, what's so bad about it? Does the Matrix perhaps bother you somehow? Does it prevent you from living? Or what's the problem? Why did you even come here? What exactly is so wrong with it? So what's wrong with living in the matrix? Everyone is living in it, right? Well, most individuals, regrettably, tend to lead very shallow lives in that aspect indeed. You're born, you get married, perhaps find some purpose, you work, you die, and then they usher you to the cemetery. And that's essentially it, isn't it? Your entire life. I even recall one of our awakened, Alexander Ostapenko, who recently had his awakening. He once came to my first seminar, and I asked him, "So, Sasha, what brings you here?" And he simply replied, "Well, everything just feels very, somehow, empty, you know? You're just born, you get married, and you die." "That's it?" He replied. "That's all?" "Well, that's it. Let's see." Freedom, no meaning. No growth. You want to break out of the cage? Limitations frustrate some, right? The matrix is a world of illusions. But what's so bad about living in illusions? Well, there's a lot of suffering and very little joy to be found. Someone's just grown tired of being cooped up in this matrix. It's too confining. Something deep inside is urging them to break free. Well, I really enjoyed one particular clip from the film where Morpheus is actually discussing this very topic with Neo. Let's take a moment to watch a little bit of it right now.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate, Neo?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Well, you really do have to see it for yourself. In principle, we see it all the time, right? But let me draw for you how it works. Agent Smith, could you help me? Please. Well, since we're talking about the Matrix, it shows up in our lives in different ways, but you probably have a dominant belief that you've noticed about yourself. Perhaps after our last session, you may have already been pondering this idea. Something like, for example, I'm a handsome person, I'm a successful person, I'm a failure, I'm of noble birth, I'm Robocop, I'm clumsy, you know, just something. Someone's idea, yes, some kind of concept, perhaps about themselves or about how life is structured. But for now, I want to tell you, in very simple terms, how our life is structured. Your life, right here, right now, to be exact. Let's draw your present moment. here you are. And so, for example, let's say somewhere you have a table and on it there's a laptop. Well, I'm not much of an artist, am I? A huge window. You probably live in a penthouse or something, right? With windows like these. You can see trees, firs, or something else. Well, it's evening now, but maybe for some of you there's sun, for others, the moon. Right, outside the window, maybe birds are flying. Beyond it, there's a highway. Cars are driving along it. Do you hear them? Basically, it's some kind of city. There's a building here. Perhaps at home you have a flower sitting on your windowsill. Anyway, it's the present moment. There's even a little dog running around you, which you actually decided not to remove it from the room during the broadcast, even though we asked you to. Well, it looks a bit like a rat, but let's just say it's a little dog. And this right here is your authentic present moment. You know, just a small slice, fragment, you know, like in a film strip, right? A single frame, a freeze frame. And in principle, it would all be perfectly fine if things were really that way, and you just directly perceived this world, truly felt it, and genuinely interacted with it. But that's actually not the case. We also have, besides all this, right here, deep inside us, there is a whole story. At our last meeting, Anya told you about the narrating self, which is constantly telling you something about yourself or the world around you. And right here, within your mind, reside numerous stories defining who you are, what kind of person you are, whether successful or not, a mother, a daughter, so many different roles, even distinct sub-personalities. Isn't that right? One part of you is this way, another is that way. This place often holds many wonderful stories that empower you to achieve success and confidently view the world with optimism and self-assurance. But then again, there are also those stories that, well, you know, create a certain tension and color your world with that very tension, with some gloomy tones and suffering. I'll just draw it as some scribbles, representing some kind of traumatic, depressing, unpleasant, or uncomfortable experience. And it would all be fine. But as we grow up and get older, we begin to perceive this entire world and engage with it primarily through the lens of this very story. So here's an observer, right? I'll draw two eyes for you. Everything we observe and perceive in this world passes through the prism of our distortions, through our individual stories. And depending on how much you've merged with these stories, that's how unreal your perception of the world is. Like, for example, Valentina, through various fears, right? I recall a time when I was just beginning my teaching career, and there was a story that I found particularly compelling. A woman approached me and said, "You know, indeed, everything is exactly as you've described. I have a friend," this was about 15 years ago, "who believes that everyone is always deceiving her, everywhere and all the time. And you know, if you spend some time with her, it's really true. She's deceived everywhere. They'll shortchange her at the store or not give her the correct change or something else. It's constant. I am certain that if this friend is still alive and everything is well with her, she's still attracting every swindler from all over the world, because that individual is simply attuned to that particular frequency. She views this world through such a prism, believing that scammers are everywhere, and naturally she creates this for herself. It's like the law of attraction, right? When we don't want something to happen in our lives, the universe doesn't hear the word not. It just perceives it differently. It's like saying, "Let this happen." If I don't want it, it's as if I'm asking for it, right? It's quite the opposite. I attract this experience as if I need it, as if I'm desperately asking for it. And the more I fear something, the more I attract the realization of my fears. Initially in small ways, but eventually in a serious way. That's why there's even an expression that the best good luck charm for a child is the fearless love of a mother. When a mother isn't afraid for her child, meaning she is so completely fearless and so truly confident that she doesn't need to create these horrors through her child. Well, there's a great example of this. During World War II, There was a renowned woman, it was mentioned in a book about her, I think, who sent 5 sons to the front lines from regions where only 1 in 10 men would return. And she constantly prayed for the German soldiers to make their way back home to their mothers. She prayed for others. And in the end, all 5 of them returned. Yes, it's a famous story. And it's through these prisms that we constantly view everything. So, how does this usually show up? You see, we've gathered all these stories since childhood. It's not bad. It's how we perceive the world. This is a natural part of our evolution. When we were children, we perceived this world with such purity, directly, and we instantly felt its feedback. In other words, we simply sensed it. Perhaps some of you are noticing this in your children now, if you have any, or even your grandchildren. You might have observed how much joy children experience and how they truly see and perceive everything so differently. They often perceive things very wisely because they don't yet have all these stories and prisms, these distortions, this distorted perception. Basically, any complaint you have about the world around you is already a distortion. This already means that you are caught up in that narrative again and you're perceiving it, meaning the matrix, some kind of illusion and not what truly exists. You don't see reality. And so any complaint you have, any discontent, is your involvement in a narrative. And all of these are just stories. For this reason, therefore, most people on the planet have not awakened yet. For one reason only, they are always discontent with something. Always. Even if it's just a little bit, they're discontent. It's so normal for us to be in these stories, in this discontent, in this rejection of life, that we don't awaken. And awakening, as you may have already guessed, is again a return to this kind of immediate, direct perception, a pure perception where you see things as they truly are. However, a child doesn't have all this experience, but an adult already has it. And as soon as you detach from these stories, that experience simply begins to serve you. Therefore, acquiring this experience isn't negative. It's just an evolutionary task. You had to gain that experience so that at some point you could make a conscious choice to truly see everything as it actually is. And then that experience becomes your fuel and opportunity that you use as a base and begin to grow in your consciousness. Ultimately, our task is not only to reach a state of perception like a child's, but to go even deeper. I also would like to demonstrate a bit more about how our perception functions, okay? On the next slide, you can see 2 police officers shown here, and I won't disclose who they are, right? But here's Mr. Robert, the one with the tattoos, you see, a rather powerful man, wouldn't you say? And Mr. Tom with a donut. Such lovely people. So, what can you say by just looking at them? Everything regarding our perception, every single detail, has this filter superimposed on it. So, we always perceive him and all other individuals through this particular filter. There's even a cognitive distortion for this. It's called the halo effect. When you look at someone, for example, if they make a particular first impression, then you mainly judge them primarily based on that initial impression. You've probably even heard that it takes about 7 seconds for a first impression to be formed. They look like positive guys, cheerful and kind police officers. Okay, let's immerse ourselves a little bit, yes, into the narrative again. The narrative goes like this. So you see this brave police officer with all the tattoos, well, he was actually involved in, well, he was connected to an extensive drug business network in the entire city. And this whole network supplied a huge amount of various substances to schools. And, well, can you imagine how many children, in principle, might have been affected by this over an extended period, right? And the second one, Mr. Tom, was generally, by nature, quite a greedy individual, a taker of bribes in essence, you could say a corrupt police officer. And perhaps just by looking at them, you can clarify something. What might give you a clue? If you were to meet these people, how could you possibly know what they are truly like? Pay close attention to this. How did your perception of these 2 individuals shifted once I revealed the backstory? Did anyone notice, raise your hand, yes, that you already start to feel differently, to perceive them differently, right? Yes, that definitely is a point. So now let's move on and continue with the story. In reality, this Mr. Robert was an undercover agent who succeeded in infiltrating this organization, and ultimately his achievement led to the complete dismantling of this entire network. And So that's an interesting twist, isn't it? I mean, really, he was deeply involved in it. And the second man heroically shielded a young girl when he bravely intervened in a shootout with those American hooligans. You see, there are quite a number of armed hooligans there. All in all, it's not particularly safe in that area. How has your perception of these two people changed now? Do you feel that they have somehow grown in your eyes? Do you notice such effect? Well, some of you do. Based on certain phrases, certain beliefs. Indeed, we frequently make superficial judgments and do not perceive the world directly, which often leaves us without the opportunity to truly understand things. We really need to analyze things very deeply, don't we? But once your perception shifts and you begin to perceive the world directly, you literally start to read and truly feel what a person is all about. For this reason, we often say that by practicing, you start to get so in touch with your space that basically, if some fraudster approaches you, you will very quickly begin to sense that something is not quite right here. Literally, the person just starts speaking to you, and you immediately begin to read them. Here's another moment, to lighten the mood a bit, such a dramatic situation, about how you can have different attitudes towards what happens to us, philosophically speaking. Simply, in principle, you begin perceiving information directly from the space. And you're all very familiar with this because you were all children once. Not one of you was born an adult right away, were you? And while I was engaged in my practice, at one moment I recalled myself as a child of 2 or 3 years old, and how I perceived other people. I looked at my grandmother or great-grandmother, and I didn't exist separately from them. We were united. There wasn't a separate Artem or a separate you, right? Or separate Evgeny, Gennady, or Alexandra. There was no separation. You were one with everything around you. In other words, that present moment, that was you. You were that life. You were so much in contact with it that there was no separate individual that would be tucked away in his protective shell. With countless personal narratives and stories, it didn't exist. So this is a completely natural state of perception for us. And the goal of the practice is to bring you back to this state of direct perception. But how do you achieve that? What could be done about it? Because everything that's inside you, right here, it's what controls you for 95, 98% of the time. Well, different scientists say this. Some people think differently. Here, I resonate more with an American neurophysiologist who claims it's 98%, though some individuals even suggest 99. Can you believe that? This means that what is deeply hidden within your mind truly controls your behavior. Perhaps you might gladly wish to, for example, look kindly upon someone, forgive someone, or simply be a more self-assured person, right? Or perhaps to be, a bit more generous or more loving. But you are unable to do so because you are enslaved by all these programs that are ingrained within you. Why do we refer to it as a program? Because no matter what it is, it's always some sort of algorithm. Inside you, there's a certain program that begins to control you, dictating how you should feel, how you should perceive events or other individuals, how you should assess yourself, and ultimately how you should behave. And you might even wish, for example, not to respond with anger to your child's behavior, but you find yourself unable to, because that thing inside you, you see, becomes activated. I once had a woman in my class who had been arguing with her son for many years because he suffered from a gaming addiction. He was always on the computer, and she was terribly angry and furious that he wasn't living a normal life. After starting the practices, she came to the 4th lesson and said, she told the story with tears in her eyes. That's probably why I was impressed so much. She said, I once just went up to my son, and as usual wanted to make a remark, correct him, and just unleash all my bottled-up discontent. But instead of doing that, I just gently stroked his arm and then said to him, what more can I tell you? You already know everything. But she said from her heart with such love. She was impressed that she had stopped herself and hadn't lashed out again. She went to the kitchen. 5 minutes later, her son came to her and simply began to have a conversation with her about his concerns, what was going on in his life, and so forth. And she shared this tearfully because she hadn't had a proper chat with him for about 5 years, only through arguments and fights. There was no real emotional connection at all, Well, I wouldn't say this is some kind of mind-blowing outcome. We've certainly seen more significant results. But what's important here? That as soon as a person erases at least one of their own little quirks here, right? Well, once it's gone, let's say, the way they interact with the space already starts to change. But working and addressing these issues one by one, often with psychologists, is a long and slow process. Psychologists usually work with this and try to help you to clean up your history to lighten your burden. However, it takes a very long time, very slow. It's such a slow process that even 100 lifetimes wouldn't be enough to address everything. Therefore, the solution here is very simple. It's about returning. So what do we do about it, right? This is a return to direct sensory perception, to genuine feeling, indeed. I'll draw a heart right here. It didn't turn out quite right. Still, I trust you recognize it as a heart. This person has a black heart for some reason. Well, that's just how things usually go. Generally speaking, it's about direct sensory perception, experienced through your feelings. Sensory perception. It is precisely the method by which you can immediately remove yourself from all these stories. And here it becomes a matter of skill. The deeper you can immerse yourself in sensory perception, the deeper your present moment becomes. You start to perceive it even deeper than you did in your childhood, and then less you are influenced by these narratives. It's as if you simply take yourself and completely pull yourself out of this matrix perception, out of this limited false perception, and begin to genuinely perceive the world as it really is. Of course, it won't happen overnight. Everything won't suddenly unfold. You'll see that there is no spoon, that everything is made of energy, and you'll somehow start to see what is hidden from most people. But the more frequently you do that, the more readily your body and your nature will adapt to it, and the more swiftly your awakening process will take place. But it all starts with very simple moments. It's your choice. Anya mentioned about purpose, aspiration in the last lesson. But everything always begins with a simple choice. Is this truly necessary for me or not? There's a great clip on this, by the way, that I prepared specifically for you.
Figure out who built this model. Okay, so to come with me, you have to be ready to leave. You have to be really ready. And if you're not, if you think that this is where you belong...
You call this a choice?
Oh, honestly, when somebody offered me these things, I went off of binary conceptions of the world and said that there was no way I was swallowing some symbolic reduction of my life. And the woman with the pills laughed because I was missing the point.
What point?
The choice is an illusion. You already know what you have to do.
Truth.
You know, by the way, that's what has always motivated me personally. I was interested in seeing how everything truly operates here. Mr. Smith? What is it? Oh. Mr. Smith is checking on me. There was a question about feelings. I'm referring specifically to sensory perception. You'll soon understand why I'm talking about this. By the way, this is one of the moments that is directly related to your awakening. But returning to choice, I want to emphasize one thing. Your aspiration begins with a choice. The choice is always there. You most likely didn't come here by chance. It's doubtful there are any random people here. So the choice in this direction exists. Now the discussion is entirely about whether to start this movement at all. And here's a particularly funny meme. Some might recognize yourselves. Well, I'll awaken next life. You said the same in the last one. Many people are too busy. And there's a good example of this here. I remember one particular Japanese haiku. Haiku, as you know, are simply short 3-line poems, literally comprising from just 3 lines, right? But translated into English, it goes like this. Sitting at work. A call from paradise. I'm busy. I'm busy right now. So, of course, if a person is still busy, then nothing can be done. But if you have finally managed to free up some time to actually start living, then it is indeed appropriate to take the next step. So, sensory perception. This perception is without any concepts which we are discussing, doesn't merely lead to a more realistic view of the world. You also begin to feel it in a different way. Awakening is the moment when you finally realize who you truly are. You detach from your narratives, from your body. You understood that you're neither, yet they are part of you. And from that point on, life always happens in the present moment. You always live within the perception of the present moment. You won't ever come out from the present moment again. If, before the moment of awakening, you have to force yourself to return because you drift into the past, into the future, into some murky stories again, then from this moment of awakening, you will always be in the present moment, even if you see that some stories are still swirling in your head. They are still playing out in the present moment. You see how it is happening because you are no longer identified with your stories. This gives you tremendous freedom. You truly begin to see the real world. For instance, please share. Who here has noticed that they frequently fall under some influence? Has that ever happened to you before? Do you have this experience? There are such people, right? Yes. So I can tell you, for example, from my own experience, that at one point I constantly fell under someone else's influence. Even our teacher Gennady hinted at this twice, a remark that I needed to address this because it greatly impedes my ability to transmit knowledge to people. I tend to fall too much under the influence of various authorities. However, that was quite some time ago, and I simply couldn't grasp what he meant until, at one particular moment, this awakening truly happened. And honestly, a sort of inner foundation emerged, like a solid point of support from where you understand, in relation to everything happening to you, what is true and what is false. And all that torment of choices, those doubts, all of it completely disappeared from my life, because that point of support exists. It is when you simply feel within yourself what feels right, what is truly correct, what is incorrect, and what, let's say, is false or would feel like acting against your own best interests. Once all of that was established, this chapter of my life came to a close. Really, there are many examples one could give about how people's state of being and lives have transformed after an awakening. It is quite simply a state of perception. Because as soon as you step out of the narrative, a tremendous amount of tension disappears from your life, and an abundance of free energy emerges. This free energy will immediately begin to enrich your perception. It's like watching a black and white film versus a vibrant, colorful one. You start to see everything that way. And initially, people often walk around gasping and exclaiming because they look at everything, and it appears so vibrant, so extraordinary, so vivid, so full of life. All the sounds. You just suddenly start to hear everything, to perceive what is happening around you. That in itself greatly enriches your perception. Nothing seems to have changed, yet you see it all more deeply, subtly, vividly. Eventually, you get used to it. But besides all that, you start to see what's going on in your head. And in other people's heads. This makes it much easier to handle your own mind. It stops pushing you around and controlling you so much. However, you also begin to perceive awareness in other individuals. When awareness is lost, when a person is sitting there talking to you, but they're not really present, their consciousness has wandered. A program is talking to you instead. And you begin to establish a connection with the person through these programs. This really helps in so many simple daily situations when you see that someone isn't listening, isn't perceiving, and you just can switch. And instead of speaking with the persona, with these programs, you realign yourself, so to speak, with their soul, with their spirit, and begin to communicate with them as if they were the driver. It's like this is a car with a driver inside, and you communicate with the driver, not the car. You establish this connection, and in a surprising way, your interaction with that person even begins to change. That is, they start to perceive and hear you. Again, it might not happen for you immediately when you begin to practice this, but you will still be able to observe that it is occurring.